Welcome, everyone, to the SnapCast podcast with your hosts, Brad O'Brien and Mike Cooley. We're at episode 79 now, 79. Yeah, we're getting up there, man. 79 episodes old at this point. We doing all right. Yeah, so if you're just like wandering in and you're like, what the hell is this? This is a Magic the Gathering podcast where we talk about magic and magic-related things. Not at all sponsored by Truly, which may be partially showing on camera there. But if you guys are interested, let us know. We have a very devoted viewership.
Absolutely. We would take that sponsorship.
Oh, show, man.
Actually, I can't remember the last time I had one of these, but Mike showed up and was like, this bud's for you, except it wasn't a bud. It was the biggest goddamn hard seltzer I've ever seen.
Cooley with the Truly. It rhymed, so I had to buy it. Yeah, so we've got a, you know, in the past, we've sometimes gotten away from talking about, like, magic card prices, really, because shit got real weird for a while. Like, you know, it really did. But we're in an interesting time. Yet again, we always, you know, it was easy to see some cards. Sometimes we'd pick them right out of thin air. We'd be like, well, this is an easy pick. You know what I mean? But it feels like there was that time where you kind of had to do that because Magic was in a really weird spot with like the pandemic and, you know, even with people coming back, it's just like, what are things going to do? So we have been picking some pretty good cards lately. And we figured with this episode, what we would do is just kind of like talk about what we do so that if you want to do, empower yourself to kind of look for these and then come to the cast with like your thoughts and your picks for the week and we can talk about them. That would be amazing. But we would just want to kind of show you what we do and talk you through that process, how to spec on cards, when to sell cards, like some, you know, signs that you might see like, maybe we should get rid of this card. Maybe this card's too high.
I mean, like last week when I was decrying the inevitable death of Mishra's Bauble.
Yeah. It's single-handedly, though. Like, some of these strategies have single-handedly, if you want to talk about people being passively interested in Magic and MTG finance, these strategies are tried, true, and tested throughout all of my time as a Magic player. Throughout all the quarantine, I was making Diablo 2 videos and had very little time for Magic and was still able to just, boom, pick cards without even being involved a lot in tabletop games or even MTGA games. I could be like, yeah, that card's really good. That card's underpriced.
Yeah.
You did the same thing with like some of the, you were more involved, I think, but like, so, you know, you could easily just look and see, and knowing some history about it could easily pick some out.
Well, and right off the bat, the first thing that I would say is you don't have to hit 100% of the time. You know, and it's unreasonable to think that anybody's going to hit 100% of the time, as long as your average hits are stronger than your average losses. Right. You're netting positively, and then you roll that. You know, we talk about compounding, but like if you could make 10% on 10% gains on 10% gains every time in the stock market, you'd be crushing it.
Right. So
saying, okay, I bought this card at $10 and I sold it for $11. I only made $1. But if the next day, when you did that, you took that $11 card and turned that into, you know, I don't want to say an $11.10 card, but
no, but like, you know, $12, $13. It all depends. I mean, it all depends on the time frame that you do it as well. Like, you know, that's always something important. But with, like, much like with stock prices, you have certain pillars that you look at to decide if a company's good or not. And it's sort of the same thing with Magic cards. Like, you have certain things that you look at. Like, you wouldn't typically buy a stock under normal circumstances. You wouldn't buy a stock if it's at an all-time high, like, and just spiked 40% on the day. You probably wouldn't buy it. You know what I mean? It's sort of the same thing with Magic cards, you know, to some degree. But there's certain things that you're looking at. Like, there's certain things that you want to look at for price history, for like entry points, exit points, and they all depend on like a lot of different factors. And you know, those are sort of things that we that were taken into account, I think, in this episode, and just kind of talking you through what we do.
Yeah, part of what spurred today's conversation was looking at cards that are at their all-time highest value right now. That's like talking about red days and green days on the stock market. Cards that are at their absolute highest are not cards you want to buy. But
Oftentimes. And, you know,
it may be that they're on their way up and you can catch them on an increasing trend. But at that point, they're more an indicator of something that's already popped off, right?
Right. An MTG strategist says, I monitor MTG finance specifically to avoid a higher price later on.
Yes.
We sing that tune all the time. We oftentimes like throw some slang in there, like don't get caught with your pants down sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like this is, you know, you might not always nail the bottom.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's almost predictable to say, well, I don't want to get caught with my pants down when this card goes up because I can recognize the value in it. And it's probably low right now, you know? So yeah, there's certain tricks, and that's a great point too. Even if you're not specking on them to like make a buck off of them, you just don't want to pay a higher price later on. That's a perfectly legitimate way, I think, to grab Magic cards.
That's 90% of what I do is saying, I don't really need this card, but if I need this card next year and it's $20 instead of $5,
yeah,
that hurts. So, like earlier today when I was looking at 2X Masters, how many modern staples were in 2X Masters that you had the perfect opportunity to get in at a new bottom for?
Yeah.
And now, like, I'm going to say it right now, one of my picks this week is a card that I'm personally looking for is Glimmer Void, which was a rare in double Masters. Affinity is actually seeing an uptick in play in Modern.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I don't see that card going back down below $8. Like, let's just take a look at it.
And I think this is a good point to bring up. One of the pillars that we look at when speccing on cards, and that is just price memory of the card. Like, whether we like it or not, and whether that price memory actually matches the value of the card, sometimes, more often than not, it will come into play for the long-term value of the card. Because there was a reason at one point that card was so high. So like one card in recent history that, you know, could be a shining example of price memory and why people might flock to the card at an extremely low price is Grim Tutor, right? So anyone who played Legacy or wanted that for a commander deck might remember the price being $200 and being practically unaffordable. You're just like, well, I like this tutor, but it's not as good as Vampiric Tutor. It's not as good as Demonic Tutor, with all cards that were cheaper in price. You know what I mean? But suddenly when that card goes down to $10 because of a reprint in various versions, that price memory might actually be keeping the card higher than it's worth. You know what I mean? But it will also lead to, as the card goes out of print, are you lighting me right up on this camera?
I'm trying to fix it, but
as the card goes out of print, though, that's another thing that that price memory existed for a reason. Like that card that was printed in Starter was extremely rare and hadn't been printed ever since. As the card goes out of print, and that Starter version of it starts to go up, like the original printing of it, the price memory it's like a phenomenon of magic. Like it suddenly starts averaging out the other price and bringing it up too. So it's like price memory. It's not always an indicator. Like none of these factors that we'll talk about today are like a 100% indicator. It's like something to take into consideration, right? One of them is definitely price memory. It takes a lot of tribal knowledge to accurately guess what cards are going to take over the meta. I did it with Teferi Time Raveler, but missed it completely with Uro. I don't think you're alone with that, honestly. We were talking about the same thing, like the T3 Fairy. As soon as it was printed, I remember we had a whole conversation about like, hey, do you remember the cards that would stop Cascade and they would do it in a way like the original Teferi? Remember the original creature Teferi that was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 mana. He was a creature, 3/4 with flash. And he did the same thing. He had the same static ability. That was just like players can't cast spells or unless they're at the speed of sorcery or whatnot. Well, it was so devastating in so many ways.
But the thing that I think you just both pointed out is that you had historical precedent. So a second ago you were talking about price memory. Now we're saying, I don't know what this card is going to do because it's that effect but on a planeswalker. But I know that this effect in a previous version that cost more mana was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean,
with Uro, at the especially at the time that they were announced, nobody really knew how Escape was going to play. And it was the same thing with Oko. People were like, I don't know what food is, but this card, I mean, a lot of people were down on Oko. So I don't think you're in the I think you're in the majority in that you're not going to hit, but having I liked that phrase of tribal knowledge.
Right.
It's game knowledge.
It really is. It's seeing decks in the past and knowing what things were broke. Like with Uro, this was another one we talked about, and I feel really bad for like it was one of those cards with Uro. I don't know if we missed out, but I guess I was maybe this is the definition. I was always hoping for a better opportunity to get in. We always knew how good it was. And it was because of that tribal knowledge, right? Like, what was one of the first things we talked about when they started printing these new these new Titans, right? It was immediately, I said, oh yeah, like Torpor Orb. Like those types of effects are just devastating with these. They just stay in play for a reduced mana cost. And it was because of that tribal knowledge with Phyrexian Dreadnought and like, this stupid shit. The stupid ways people try to work their way around his busted ETB ability or drawback ETB ability and just cheat it into play. And like, so I guess we were always hoping for a better opportunity, but that's a good point. And possibly another pillar that we'll talk about as well is that the tribal knowledge. That could be the official name of it, but game knowledge is what you're talking about.
Well, and so when I'm talking about Glimmer Void, it sort of is tribal knowledge because you're really only seeing Glimmer Void in affinity decks, but the actual keyworded ability affinity is seeing play again in modern. I'm working on putting together a Manguchi list to try and play at F&M, and it's running 2 Glimmer Void, which is a card that I haven't over the years. This is tangential, but I've had as a Magic player and as a collector, you probably have decks that you played or decks that you didn't play but admired, and decks that were significant as you were coming into the game. And so for me, when I first started playing Modern, original I guess I shouldn't say original Affinity, but
I know what you're talking about. Classic Affinity. Like he's talking about the bless you by the way. He's talking about the cards that actually had the word affinity on them.
No. I'm talking about after that. So I came
you're talking about
Ravager.
I'm
talking about Ravager Affinity.
The sacking effects with Cranial playing.
Right.
Yeah.
When I first started playing Modern, I was the guy that was saying, "Why do they call this deck Affinity?"
Nothing in it.
I don't understand it because nothing in this deck says Affinity. And I got housed by that deck. I got housed by you playing that deck. I got housed by Brian Harnish playing that deck. I got housed by people I don't know playing that deck because it was so tricky and complicated, fast and powerful. And so I always had an affinity for Affinity, even though I never played it.
I like what you did there. I see what you did, and I like it.
It was very expensive at one time.
Yeah.
And so what I've done over the years is every time a piece got reprinted, like they did those Arcbound Ravager promos.
For $10? Yeah, I picked up 4 of those.
Exactly.
I was like,
I got a play set of those.
I've played and know how powerful this card is, and a foiled version with new art for $10, $9.99 was great. It's that price memory.
So over the last probably 4 or 5 years, when I saw Vault Scourges in somebody's trade binder, I'm like, they were worth nothing at that point because Affinity was no longer being played. But I'm like, yeah, I want to trade for them. I want to have them in my binder. I want to, Memnites. Yep. I want to trade for your Memnites.
Right.
Just because in the back of my brain, not that I even thought that Affinity was I didn't know Affinity was going to come back. But if they printed something that was going to bring Affinity back, I wanted to have the pieces. I wanted to have that deck. So I've been slowly doing it. But They banned Mox Opal. It seemed like we were never going to see Affinity again. Glimmer Void was one of the cards that just got reprinted last year, and that was totally under my radar.
Yep.
Like, so I'm looking now, and we could have gotten Double Masters, Glimmer Voids, even back in May
For
less than $3.
Yep.
So now I'm paying between $8 and $10.
So here's the interesting thing about Glimmer Void. So we just talked about price memory, right? Mm-hmm. So just for reference, this card used to be $50, like
Right.
the original
Let's look
printing
at
of
the
it.
mirrored in printing.
Yep. So like there was, I was close. So like $45. So then we had a whole bunch of stuff happen. We had a reprint, which, that was the only printing of it for a while. Then we had a reprint, and it also hovered around like $5-10 before it spiked up to 45. But then we had a reprint, which dropped the price of it significantly, right? And then we had a banning of Mox Opal, which dropped it even more.
Yeah.
And, those are always catalysts that we talk about. Like after bannings, when certain cards go down, even though Glimmer Void itself wasn't banned, you know what I mean? It went down in price because of a banning. Mm-hmm. And not only do we have that, we had a reprint. But the value of the card was still there. So it was one of those cards that when I cracked this in its reprint packs and realized that it was a $5 card at the time, I didn't even put it in my trade binder. Because my price memory, I was like, this used to be a $45, $50 card. I'm not trading this for $5. Because
It's
like
funny
the magic...
we just had this conversation about another card.
Yeah, like the value in my head, I was like... I know that in the right circumstances, this card is insane. And I know I'm not letting it go for $5. It's just worth so much more to some Magic deck I might not even know I'm going to need yet. Like, than trading it for some dumb shit at $5. Like, you know what I mean? So that's sort of the price memory, I think, is very, very important. Like, and knowing that price was that high for a reason at one point. You know what I mean? That this was something that was, it shot up in price because of a catalyst. I look for cards that do something that I haven't seen before that can bypass answers in the game, like Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It does something obscene, bypassing the graveyard. Yeah, let's check that out. Bring that up. I'd love to see
I
that.
don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's amazing. But that's also good too. Like cards that do weird things. And to add on to that, MTG strategist. To add on to that, cards that deal with or circumnavigate zones in general.
This is a card for you, sir.
Oh, man. Each opponent, so it's a Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Well, we're bringing up it on screen here, but it's 2 blue mana and 1 colorless, so 3 CMC. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. Yeah, we looked at this the other week. Yeah, this is interesting. This is very interesting. We talked about, actually, there's a deck in Commander that it can exile its entire deck. Like the ad nauseum deck there. Already pre-ordered my overpriced playset. What is it?
Jason Clark.
Well, I mean, is this going to be at the power level of an Uro? I doubt it. You know what I mean? But it could be one of those situations where you're always looking for like a better opportunity to get into it and it never comes. And all this takes, and this is, I think, the point that MTG Strategist is talking about, all this takes is some other card to turn it into a fucking rocket that's going to the moon. Like, that's...
Okay, AMC.
Like, well, it's all it takes is one card printing, like, of something that goes well with this to AMC this, right? Like, to, in case you don't know, we're talking about the stock market reference with the stock AMC going to the moon.
So Jason Clark said he did wait for it to drop to $5. Let's see if we can find it.
Yeah, that doesn't seem horrible.
I don't see it that.
Yeah, and the other cool thing that I really like too, specifically, I hate to go on too much of a tangent about this card, but one thing that I do like about this card and why I love it in Mill is because there's some word you do not see in the text of this card. Target.
I know.
And that's what I absolutely love that about Mill cards.
So, the only thing that I would say about this, and this is a great opportunity for clarification. Yes, if you play Mill, I would buy 4 of these and not really care if it's $8 or $5 or $10. Because if you know you play mill, you're probably going to want these. And it's better to take the risk that it goes, at $8, you can take the risk that it goes down to 4, but you have them and never have to worry about it again.
Right.
And you might save money if it goes up to 15. But the thing is, this card only goes in a mill deck.
Yeah.
So what this card would make me think is, does this card actually now put mill over the top? If that's the case, what's cheap in mill that could go up? And then I think, okay, what was just reprinted? Mesmeric Orb. So I would look at this card, and my chain of thought would probably take me to, and this is kind of what we wanted to do with this episode. So let's use this as an example.
Yeah.
If I wanted to research what's a modern mill list look like.
This is great. So Brad's diving into some resources right now that we would use to start speccing on cards. And this is what it takes when you see a card printed like this, and you can, that you have that game knowledge, and you can think, okay, this belongs in a mill. Does it make mill more powerful? I think it does. We can get into the math later if you'd like, but this is, these are some of the tools you could use.
All right. So I'm actually going to Channel Fireball and looking at Reed Duke's Oblivion Sower deck. Oh my God. So you can put all those lands into play?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's pretty good.
That's what I was actually thinking about that. Some sort of Eldrazi variant would actually like this too. Like putting him in the zone exile is interesting. So we're looking up Reed Duke's mill deck here.
Oh, of course you got to be you have to pay money to.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
To see a goddamn mill
just
list.
go to
Okay.
MTG Top 8 and just look at any deck that uses Glimpse of the Unthinkable, because that's in every mill deck. But yeah, like this is actually, speaking of tools that we use to spec on cards, this is and I know this is really rogue, but this is my number one tool that I use to spec on cards is MTG Top 8. And I do it in weird ways. You've heard me talk about in the past, like looking at modern legal cards or standard legal cards that are in like legacy and vintage formats. There's actually another thing that I do with this that we can talk about in a bit. But what you see Brad doing on screen right now is he's searching. You can search certain formats. You can search all formats with the search function on MTG Top 8 for decks that contain a certain card. So if you have that game knowledge and hey, this card's going to be good in mill, what Brad's doing is he's using the search function on MTG Top 8 to search for all decks that performed well in tournaments that contain a well-known mill card, such as, in his case, he searched for Archive Trap. That's a very, very good one. It's, 13 cards for 0 mana at its best.
And not to poke fun at Cooley, but he's a little behind the times. Jason Clark said in the chat, don't bother looking for Glimpse the Unthinkable because it's not being played anymore.
It is like it still makes its way into mill decks, but yeah, there's definitely better options. Here's the thing. Like I wouldn't, if you're going black blue mill, like there's only
you don't have to flex. It's okay.
Well, no, I'm just saying there's a certain math calculation you got to take into account for mills, like for milling cards. And like, so if you're taking a approach that's a little more safe, which is kind of like what this deck is doing. It has fatal pushes in the main, has 4 drown in the locks in the main, crypt incursions in the main. You're taking a safety approach. So you're trying to survive and play out the long game. There's other decks that don't do that try to race, that still might use some of these cards. It depends on your variant.
Hey, Craig.
What's up, Craig?
Right. So there are definitely different versions. I think that these are what's being played right now is allowing for some interaction because you can't survive modern right now.
Yeah.
Without some interaction. You can
4
try and go
counter spells in this deck too. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is get down Mesmeric Orb and let your opponent make a bunch of tokens. Isn't that right, Jason?
Fractured Sanity too. God damn.
So, if Tasha's Hideous Laughter is going to make the cut in here, you can do one of two things. You can say, well, what is it going to bump out?
Right.
Right? So that's going to, if the average CMC of Modern is dropping down more and more, how many cards are they likely to mill out? You can't say if this is better than Glimpse the Unthinkable because it depends on the matchup.
Well, here's the formula that they use.
Okay.
So this is what it used to be, and it seems like with the deck list that we're looking at now, it's a little different. It used to be that you needed 4 or more cards per 1 mana spent.
Sort of like a 3 or more mana from a bolt.
Right.
Burn.
Exactly.
I understand what you're saying.
That was by the very least. But for the sheer fact that breaking and entering was taken out of decks, that suggested that that curve went up, that you needed more cards per mana
To mill.
Right.
Yeah.
And someone did break down the actual statistics of cards such as Mind Funeral, that for 3 mana, how many cards does it get on average? And it was 13 cards. Okay. So technically it was above the 4 card count, but it quickly got taken out of decks when more powerful cards were printed, and you don't really see it anymore.
That's what I want to get at. I don't actually give a shit about mill. No offense to President Company or Jason Clark. What I want to figure out, is what card, if Tasha's Hideous Laughter is going to get played in the deck, what is not going to get bumped out? Like Archive Trap is probably not going to get bumped out.
Right. What's the price of Archive Trap right now, too, by the way? This is oh wow, $25, $22 to $25. This is something that what I also like about MTG Top 8 is you can click on the card and it kind of like it gives you a rough estimate of the price, which is something that I like.
Right. I if I have the time, I like to follow it right over to TCG Player and look to see what I could snap up a copy for.
Right.
Or what, more often than not, I will look to see what I can get 4 or more copies for.
Yep.
Which always drastically changes the price. Like if I wanted a playset of this card, they're $25 a piece.
Yep.
And for most people that are gonna build a deck from scratch, if somebody wants to get into mill, they're gonna need 4 copies. They can do one of 2 things. They can buy 1 copy from Odin Games and Hobby, and 1 copy from Dark Tower, and 1 copy from Gateway, and 1 copy from Silvervine, and they're gonna save $20 overall.
Right.
Or they're going to be like most degenerate Magic players and pay $25 a piece for them. Okay. But again, backing up. So Archive Trap is probably not the card that gets cut, though.
Right.
Right? Mesmeric Orb just got a reprint.
And on average, I want to point this out. I know you don't give a shit about mill. Yeah. On average, 10 cards. Slightly more than 10.
In the course of a game or per mana?
Per the mana spent in the course of the game.
So these, I feel like, again, were just reprinted a little under $10.
Yep.
If we go and look at what they're actually selling for, $7.50, $8.50, $9.50. If I wanted to buy 4 or more to like throw them in a box and spec on them, here's a guy at $8.78 has 32 of them.
Yep, there you go. Yeah. So
this is actually scary though. Like now this is something else that I consider when I'm looking at a spec. There's a guy here with 230 there is a shop here with 213 listed.
Yes.
Jason Clark is saying there are $10 foils.
Yeah. So this is a good chance to sort of name the other pillar that we're looking at here, and that is quantity or supply.
Yeah.
Right? Like how many are there out there and how many options do people have? Right?
Yeah.
So like, that's something that we sort of alluded to last week when we were looking at the Narset Planeswalker for 3. We said, hey, if you don't have these now, you can still find some copies, your cheap copies. If you don't want to get caught with your pants down, get the copies for $1.50 because options are running out for people that want these other copies of the card.
Right. And I think the language you specifically used was their obtainability or their unobtainability. They will get to all of the special versions are basically reaching a point where the average person is not going to buy one.
And they're going to opt for those cheaper versions.
Right, which means that the uncommon regular printing from the set is going to go from $1.50 to $5 over the next 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And so, again,
I would argue even sooner than that.
You're going to save yourself. If it went to $5 and it was $20 for a playset, you went from spending $8 to $20. That's a pack of sleeves from
Right.
Dragon
Right.
Shield. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You're really doing your future self a favor. So in this instance, I might look at Tasha's Hideous Laughter and say, this is going to be a rare in a standard set. This card's going to be dirt cheap.
Yep.
But this card, if it makes mill better enough that it's hitting the top tables at events more often, I think makes Mesmeric Orb go up, or it makes Crypt Incursion go up. Like,
Yeah.
how many times is Crypt Incursion's 40 cents, but it's going to make something else in that deck. It might make Archive Trap go up.
Yeah.
Archive Trap just had its reprint in the list.
Yep.
It's not going to get any cheaper than it is right now.
Yeah. And I would also add to this, like under this same finance speculation, that even if it doesn't make mill, it brings up an interesting question. Because if a card like that, let's say it on average gets 15 cards, let's say, right? On average. Even if it doesn't bring up the price of mill, it should suggest to you that mill has some pretty goddamn powerful cards in it then. Yeah. So what is it using that is underpriced, right? Like if that card doesn't make mill or doesn't make mill better, then there should be some cards in mill that are just insane. It's and that's it. So it definitely should draw some attention to, it should draw your attention to that deck for sure.
Jesus Christ. So many, we've talked about this like every 3 or 4 episodes about these $10 uncommons.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Drown in the Lock.
Oh my God. We called it.
We're about
first episode ever. Called it at 50 cents. What's she at? 10, 11 bucks?
Yeah.
Card Kingdom has them for $1.50. This is what I hate about MTG Top 8 is I never know which price to believe because it will say like the range on it seems so weird sometimes.
Oh, look at this. Oh, because they might be looking at the...
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but even still, the card being at like $2 right now is
Jesus,
still
I was going to
good.
be so friggin' astounded if that... I mean, I actually would have believed it, but...
Yeah,
because it is that good.
Yeah,
and if we called it at 50 cents, it's already quadrupled.
Oh yeah, well I mean, have you played MTG Arena? I actually just installed it on my gaming PC that I stream with the other day to get back into this and start playing. I got my ass kicked, by the way, but I was playing some just random games in various formats. This was like the #1 counterspell in formats that allowed it on there. Like there was nothing more devastating than having a Drown in the Lock played against you. I was like, yeah, well, this is stupid. This card's stupid. Like every time I saw it, I was like, what, you got to fucking Drown in the Lock? Oh yeah, you do. God damn it. Like, oh, you didn't counter this creature spell. Oh, I'm safe. And then Drown in the Lock, kill it. God damn it. Like it's so demoralizing. There's so many levels to that card, but
so one of the other things that I sort of wanted to talk about today was from a revelation that I had earlier today, looking at MTG stocks and looking at sets. So as anybody that's played the game for a long time, there maybe has been a set or two where you went deep. Like when Modern Masters 2017 came out, and I think I got 3 boxes of that set. And going deep might be different for different folks. But what that meant was I have a whole lot of commons and uncommons from Modern Masters 2017.
Yeah, and Brad just went over to, if anyone's keeping track of the resources, he's using mtgstocks.com.
So one of the cool things about MTG stocks is you can go up here to sets, find Modern Masters 2017, and there's a couple of ways you can get to this point. But for me, I know that I have a bunch of this bulk, and every once in a while, rather than like go and sift through the box and try and figure out in the box what's worth money, what you can do is find out what's worth money and then sift through the box.
Exactly.
So
now they have a mental target of cards.
Exactly. So I'm looking at Modern Masters 2017. Let's go to uncommons because they're likely to carry the most value. I'll look for the highest market value for a card. And I see Serum Visions, Dimir Signet, Seaside Citadel, Arcane Sanctum, Wall of Denial, Rakdos Signet, Golgari Signet, Savage Lands.
And do you have this filter sorted by like the most expensive?
I have this sorted by market price. Yep.
Wow. So these are the ones that float to the top of the list for uncommons.
Right. And so if we just look at, so I'm going to look at $1 up. Let's look at market from $1 up. Is Goblin Assault, all of the signets, and most of the 3-color lands.
Wall of Denial.
I'm not going to call Path to Exile, like, that's not bulk. I don't have,
Yeah,
I didn't
no one
leave a
bulks
bunch
that.
of paths in there.
Same with Inquisition.
Exactly.
No one bulks that.
But here's
It's that price memory that we talked about. No one bulks those.
here's what I decided to do. I looked at something like Dimir Signet. Okay, it's saying the market price on those is about $273. I might have 8 or 10 of these in that box. I'm not going to pull it out and try and figure it out right now.
Right.
But what I don't want to do is try and sell 8 or 10 Dimir Signets for $2.50 on eBay. I don't want to bother trying to sell them on Facebook.
Yep.
But if I go to TCG Player, look up Magic, and look up buy list, I can get an idea of what would TCG Player. Don't take my email address down, people. I appreciate it if you didn't.
Yeah, what would they give you on a buy list for these? Yep. I mean, it's a very safe way to do it too. Like whenever you send this like in a box of cards to a website like this, you know that the person you're dealing with or the entity that you're dealing with on the other end is typically very trustworthy.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to get your money from TCG Player.
Right.
Now, you can run into some things where if you overestimate the condition of your cards, you might lose out. But if we just look at Modern Masters 2017, Uncommon, Dimir Signet, they're going to give me $1 a piece.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I mean, $1.17.
Yep. Crazy.
They're saying there's weird things. It's actually looks like it's getting higher priced for less graded, but that's weird.
Yeah.
Like
you can also just see the demand though, written there like in blue. You can see like on, it says 111 wanted by 17 stores here, 108 wanted by 11 stores. Like you can really get a good idea with this site, with this tool, of the demand of the cards. So we talked about the supply with options and stuff, what options people have. These buy lists allow you to get a good grasp on the demand for it, especially at MTG stocks.
Right, so now I go back to, well, okay, what do I got for, I know that I probably have 10 or more Wall of Denials.
Yep. Crazy
Come back
good card,
over
by the way.
here and look at Wall of Denial. This hurts my brain. Jason says this is awesome.
Well, but it's one of those things that like whenever you're not gonna look at all of these things with any cards, because if a card is being brought to your attention, it's probably just going to raise questions, right? Like we're just kind of showing you the avenue to check these things, right? It's probably going to raise questions for you, which it should. You're not just going to be like, I'm going to pick a random card and then go plow through all of these, 8 pillars that we talked about or something. You know what I mean? Instead, you're probably going to be like, this card's good, and I think it might go somewhere. I have a question. How many of these cards are out there? Why is this card so low in price? And you might think, is the demand high? And you might look and say, oh, yep, the demand's high. And then we've shown you ways to check the supply and the options that people have. Oh, yep, look at that. The options are very high. And so, right now, maybe it would suggest that barring any reprints or anything, this card would go up in price. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. You can answer the questions that you have about a card with some of these tools. I wouldn't suggest picking a random card that you feel good about picking a random card, I should say, and testing it against this. That's going to take you forever. Yeah. You got to have a good feeling about a card.
Well, and so to go back to MTG stocks and say we're looking at I hate this. Okay. Modern Masters 2017 uncommons, the likelihood that I have a bunch of these uncommons that are over $1, that buy list between 70 cents and $1.50, I'm likely to have in that box over there 40 cards that would net me an easy $30 buy list.
Mm-hmm.
And all I've done is say, what are the ones? What are the 10 cards? Okay, I'm going to go through that box, pull out the signets, the tricolor lands, and the Wall of Denials, Serum Visions or whatever. I don't have to do a $1 billion buy list, but I can look here and get a sense of all the cards that I want to pull, send them into the buy list, get my store credit even, because you can do store credit for a better thing with them.
Yep.
And then buy cards that you do want to spec on.
Exactly.
And this is a way of sort of looking by set. Now, we can look at commons because there are, occasionally commons that have value that you wouldn't think about.
Right.
Soul Warden, Ghostly Flicker. But now you're talking about nickel and 25-cent
right.
buy list prices that the people that really are grinding this stuff for trying to get every ounce of value out of it will do. I would rather pass this on to somebody else.
Yeah. And this is, speaking of strategies in general that can really net you money or value in the long term with MTG, selling your cards in bulk and knowing the general value of them like this, or, trading them in for buy listing them, and then using that store credit, which they'll give you a premium, and putting that into other cards that you're speccing on and have gone through all of these steps, is a way to sort of like add a compound component to your Magic investing, if you can call it that, at really no cost to you, because you're trading a lot of these bulk cards that you have kicking around. And it's always a good idea to trade lots of smaller value cards for less cards of greater value.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I will say about that is that then when you decide to cash out, it's a lot easier to eBay $100 card or sell on Facebook $150 card. That is highly desirable, because obviously if it carries that kind of price tag, it's because it's rare and people want it.
Yeah.
And then you're shipping one card and making one transaction, which is way, way better. Yeah. I see lots of people selling in Facebook groups that are, posting lists of hundreds and hundreds of cards, and they're trying to basically run shops on Facebook, and that's not my game. Sort of like what MTG Strategist said earlier, I want to make the game cheaper for me in the long run. I also like to collect cards because I like to collect them, so trying to get them when they're a deal is really my game. I'm not trying to make a whole lot of money off of this.
And I feel like when people get to that point of cashing out, a good buddy of mine, Brady, actually once said, he goes, people never stop playing Magic. They just stop having people to play with. And I think when people get to that point is typically when they cash out. But if you do get to that point and have been trading like this, I've often seen players who do that cash out in a better spot than where they started, and it's just because of the, you have to be opportunistic, I think, with all of this, when you buy list cards, when you should use that opportunistically. I think this is a little, I think this card's a little low, or I don't want to get caught with my pants down with this card. You know what I mean? I'm going to use my store credit from these buy lists to get these cards that I need or that I think are low in price. It's just literally adds that compound component to your investment, and literally, like I said, at no cost to you if you're taking your cards that you have kicking around in bulk that you're not using.
I have to say, I've been struggling with, I went and played Modern last week, went 0-3 drop. Humans was not doing very well, and it was making me think, okay, what do I want to play in Modern? And started looking at decks that were doing well and thinking, okay, I'm 3/4 of the way to that deck. I'm 3/4 of the way to this deck. I'm 3/4 of the way to that deck. That's kind of cool that if I want to play the Ragavan, like the Jeskai Stoneblade, I probably only need to spend $100 on cards. If I want to play the affinity list that I was looking at, I probably need to spend about $40 or $50 in cards. And for somebody that wants to just start playing Modern, they're going to get hosed coming into $600, $700, $800 decks. And it's by making good choices over time and picking stuff up when they're low.
Exactly.
And trading for staples that you get into a spot where you think, okay, I can pretty much play what I want without breaking the bank. But that said, I also can't. I have to go get a bunch of cards to play any goddamn deck in Modern. I wish I could just play humans.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of having the long-term approach is like when you see cards get reprinted in tank and price, and you just know from the price memory, you know from your game knowledge, this card is going to be used. It doesn't matter that it was reprinted, and tanked in price. I know, like Stoneforge Mystic. You know that if that gets reprinted in tanks and price, it's that card the use and value of that card is still going to exist years later. Yeah. So like it's one of those opportunistic times to like, okay, I can get into it now when it's down at a comfortable price range.
That gives us a perfect segue because we just had the equivalent of a Masters set of all new cards printed into Modern. That included some key reprints for cards that are played in Legacy and cards that are played in Modern.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Modern Horizons 2 and all the fetch lands and all their multiple variations.
Absolutely.
I think that we're having a hard time right now looking at Modern Horizons 2 and saying that we're at the bottom. Like, where is the bottom on this set overall? Is so hard to tell.
Very, very tough to call.
I brought this. I'm going to bring back up MTG stocks, or I'm going to try to if the computer will let me. And Modern Horizons 2, and look at all of the. Let's look at the sort of highest cost cards in the set. So Ragavan. Nimble Pilfer is still the highest value card in the set.
About $72, $73 now on average.
Look at the price graph since it's come out. I can tell you anecdotally, and from what I see on Reddit and what I see on Twitter, a crap ton of this product is being opened.
Yeah.
A crap ton of this product is being opened.
Yeah.
And Ragavan has not gone down in price.
This is if you want to go back to the first pillar that we talked about, price memory, nothing is more dangerous in the game of Magic than immediate price memory. Immediate price memory on an already good card. So we saw this same phenomenon, I should call it, happen with Renin 6.
God damn it. Jason, hold on, before you say something. Jason Clark, in the chat, what did I say about Ragavan?
Did you make that same comparison?
I saw him yesterday in my driveway, and I said, "This is the Renin 6 of Modern Horizons 2."
Nailed it. We're on the same wavelength yet again. Yeah, it's so funny because nothing is more dangerous than recent price knowledge of already good cards in Magic. Like this card might very well be overprinted. However, there's so many people that are just waiting for the opportunity to get it. As soon as it like dips a little bit, they'll just get it. They'll just get it at a good price because they have that recent price memory. It's literally the Renin 6 of this set.
And again, Renin 6 dipped for a little while after the set had been out for 6 months, but it's right back to where it was now.
And higher.
Yeah.
It came out, it was like, I think when it came out was the cheapest you could have ever got it, which was like, I think $40-$50 or something like that.
Meanwhile, the second highest value card in the set is Scalding Tarn, which you would think also this has a long history of price memory. And that came out, and it looked like it bottomed out, and then it came back up again, and is now slowly trending down.
Yeah.
And so conversely, I actually think that we're not at the bottom on fetches.
I don't think so either. I think this graph actually points it out very well. You can kind of, if you look, it's beautiful the way that MTG Stocks does this. Almost like a stock graph that you're looking at, right? Like it shows you, okay, there's the reprint, or like there's when it comes out and then like drops in price, and it kind of has like what's called a dead cat bounce, where like it goes down low and then bounces back up, but it never really re-achieves its high and starts going back down again, and then you get a little dead cat bounce, and then people holding it. But I think this is a perfect indicator of how much the set is being printed, because all of these little dead cat bounces that you see here, I think are from the people that didn't want to pay $90 for it when it was that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, wow, Scalding Tarn at $50 So they're buying it. They're getting the copies that they need. They're not speccing on a $50 card that can be reprinted. So they're just getting the copies that they need. And then you can see the price slowly receding away from it. And it just suggests how much the card's being printed.
When you think, again, that how many of these things have been opened and that they will continue to be open, there's two things to remember. One, they're going to print boxes of this set all year long, but they're only going to print collector box. All of the collector boxes have been printed. So they might still be sitting at distributors. They might still be sitting in warehouses, but all the collector boosters have been printed. Yeah. And that's totally fine. Tech4 said in the chat that he bought 2 Tarns because he's happy with the price.
Yeah.
Again, price memory or knowing what the value of the card is, this is a reasonable price.
I think so too.
I would rather have it in my hand than fight for it in 6 months at $5 less. Because the other thing is, and this is why, another tangent. I told Jason Clark yesterday or the day before, I thought that Ragavan was the new Renin 6, was the Renin 6 of this set.
Yep.
I had that revelation on Saturday, and I knew a local player that had 3 of them. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Tech4.
I knew a local player that had 3 of them that was trying to part with them. And I hemmed and hawed about it. I didn't want to trade for Ragavans at $73 a piece. One of them was a full art foil. It's like $140, like to try and trade for these cards. And I changed my whole mindset when I said, these are the Renin 6s of this set. They're not going to drop down to, and this was the calculation that I had. Mm-hmm. If I got a playset of Ragavans at $70 a piece, $280, and they drop down to $50, I will have lost $80.
Yep.
It will have been like one of those cards disappeared.
Yep.
I will have lost, $80 in perceived value, but I will have played with them the whole time. As they become less opened, they'll be harder to trade for. So I'm calculating my time, like the time value of money, how hard it would be for me to actually find somebody to trade for these with down the road. I want to factor that in. And then the long-term thinking as a Magic player is, if this is the new Renin 6, if it goes from 70 to 50, next year it's going to be 70 again.
Right.
And I'm really not losing anything, even if the card drops below the price I paid for it.
Yep. Yeah, and it of course is barring like significant reprints, as always. But yeah, I think Renin 6 is a very fair comparison for that card. Like it's just, the recent price memory, it's in the decks that it makes 4 of them. It's a very good card. So yeah, can we end this with a little bit of a story about, how I have gone about speccing on some cards in.
Oh, absolutely. This is not just the Brad show. The one thing that before we leave Modern Horizons 2 though, because my other pick this week, or card that I'm going to suggest people keep their eye on, is Sword of Hearth and Home, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. I have been playing this a lot in EDH, and one EDH staple equipment is Sword of the Animist, which is more affordable to play. It's a and I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's 1 mana to play, 2 mana to equip.
Wow. This card's good.
When you attack, you get to search up a basic land. Okay.
And blink a dude. Wow.
But Sword of Hearth and Home is for 3 mana and equip 2, like all the other swords. Protection from path, protection from swords, protection from green means you can just swing into the guy that's got, all the fatty dinosaurs and stuff in EDH. It gets to blink your Stoneforge Mystic and ramp you.
Yeah.
I think that this card is way undervalued right now. It may get down. It may get down to $15, but I don't think you're going to see it below $15.
Yeah, that's a good pick, man. I like that. It's very powerful. It does a lot of powerful things that with the right cards, it definitely gives you card advantage when it hits, which has historically been a very good thing for swords to do. Is to give you card advantage when they hit. They search up a land and put it into play. They give you permanent advantage. That's extremely good. And they thin your deck. This one right here. But also in the event that you're putting this in a ETB style deck, it's really, really good.
Getting the blinks.
It just gets the blinks in, like
those sweet, sweet blinks.
Yeah, it's really good, man. I do like that. I do like that choice. So to end this with a story, like if you want to, it's hard to go about Magic the Gathering and to say, with all of the thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands of cards that have been printed, I don't even know how many, but there's a shit ton. How do I pick ones to focus on? Like, what do people do? And I'm just going to tell you how I've gone about in the past picking some and have had some very good success with it. You've heard my stories before. Like I said, my number one tool is MTG Top 8. I really do like, and I won't spend too much time on this part because you guys have already heard me say it. I love going into legacy and vintage deck lists and looking for modern legal cards, modern or even standard legal cards, and seeing the prices, seeing how they're being used, how many of them are being used in that deck. I think that's a very good way to do it. But there's another strategy that I use with this that I don't really talk about much. But the reason I don't talk about it is because it's like gold mining, you know what I mean? Or like, it's like panning for gold. Is like, it isn't a 100% that you're always going to find something. But when you do, you're going to know it. This is how I found Tainted Pact, probably my best spec of all time. Okay. I bought, 20, 30 copies of this at 50 cents. And this was how I found it. I went on to MTG Top 8, which a lot of my friends give me shit for this because it deals with dual commander. Like, one-on-one commander.
After he said a lot of people give me shit for this, I clicked on commander.
Clicked on commander right away. He knew where I was going with this. Because the lists have historically been 1v1 commander. And a lot of people just don't play that. People are like, oh, well, nobody plays that. Well, I don't look at it because nobody plays it. You know what I mean? I look at it because of the power level of the cards in the deck. If your commander deck had to go one-on-one with something, these are the most powerful cards you could use.
Yep.
And they typically lead to the best lists of Magic decks, even in, or of Commander decks, even in multiplayer. So what I did back then is I would look at, bigger tournaments that had some of the best performing decks, some of the decks that did make the top 8. Brad has brought up a list here of even a smaller tournament, 14 players, and it shows you the top 2 decks. Now, what I do is I go through the list, and granted, it's a little more tedious, and this is what I mean, like with my comparison of panning for gold, because the list of cards in this is a singleton format, so you have like 100+ cards a lot of times, or 100 cards to look at with every list that you're looking at. So what I do is I go through, having a knowledge of the game, and I look for cards that I recognize, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I know that card's good, I know that card's good. But I look for the cards that stand out that I don't know, that I've never seen the name of before. And that was how I found Tainted Pact. Oftentimes these will show up in the instants and sorceries section, is where I found a lot of them. So like you can see in one of these top lists, like for example, Brad has brought up Vanishing Verse, a newly printed card. You know what I mean? Technically, it's already making 1v1 commander decks that are doing very well.
Yep.
You know what I mean? This was the number 1 deck, Saskia the Unyielding, and Vanishing Verse was in there. I often look for cards that weren't recently printed that don't have a lot of attention on them that I've never heard of.
Oh,
Like,
can we find one of those in this list? I don't think so.
so now you'll see. I mean, I love that we talk about Tainted Pact because it's in this list. It's a commander staple now. Yeah. And you know what I mean? And because of that, because of the card that was printed, you know, the
Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, Thassa's Oracle.
Which
it's
is
like
not in here, but
it's not in here, but like that's not the point. This card was good without Thassa's Oracle. Is how I noticed it. I was like, wow, Tainted Pact in a singleton format seems really good. But you know, so I go through, and we'll just use this list for example. What about Deadly Rollick? Like right up here.
Deadly Rollick was printed in the 2020 Commander decks.
Yep.
If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. It's a $14-15 card.
Wow. Okay, so it's $14-15, but I've noticed right away I didn't immediately recognize the card.
Yep.
The thing that one of the pillars about this in my search process that would scare me away a little bit, but not much in this specific example, is the recent printing of it.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that because it was a recent but limited printing.
Yeah. The only thing that I see in this is, and I know I'm butting in on your thing, is this is a commander only card. So this wouldn't fit into Modern, Legacy, or any other format.
Well, neither would Tainted Pact. I mean, well, I guess Tainted Pact would fit in Legacy after the printing of Thassa's Oracle. But yeah, like, so, but we notice the power level of the card, and you note that. Like, okay, yep, now I know, like, program that to memory. This Deadly Rollick, I hadn't, you know, now that I see the picture of it, I've seen it in passing, but I'm like, okay, yep,
yeah,
duly noted. This is used in 1v1 commander decks, and its power level is pretty high.
I'd be surprised if we'll probably see all of the free spells in different decks. If we look at Elise, I'm sure we'll see.
Oh, for sure.
Deflecting SWAT and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you can also see, though, and as sort of anecdotal evidence in this exact list right here, and Brad was just talking about some of the recent uncommons that were in a set that were the highest priced, right? Terminate was in that list, right? Mm-hmm. It's also in this 1v1 commander deck in this singleton format, right? The power level of this card is high. And that's what this sort of test will tell you, is that when there are, you know, when you have to be efficient with your card choices, which are the ones that pop to the surface? You know what I mean? Terminate's one of them. Would I say go out and spec on a ton of Terminates? No. But this is what I mean by panning for gold. You're going to recognize some of these. You're not going to recognize some of these. But it's whenever you see the cards, and to really bring it back to, you know, what one of our people was talking about very early on, whenever you find a card that does weird shit, that sort of circumnavigates the game, that was what drew me to Tainted Pact when I saw it. It did weird shit that you don't see in any other card, right? It, you know, in case you're not familiar, Tainted Pact, 1 black, 1 colorless, instant, and it just basically says, exile cards from the top of your library until 2 things happen. You stop doing that, or you exile 2 cards with the same name, right? So
it's a tutor.
Yeah, and then you basically put that card that you stopped at into your hand. Yeah. So I was like, wow, so in a singleton format, this is completely busted. This is like, you know, oh, I don't have my other combo piece that I need right before my turn, tutor for it. Yep. You know what I mean? I was like, this is completely busted, and it's such a weird thing, you know? But that's kind of what you're looking for when you do this. Like, that has been my tried and true strategy that, you know, in combination with looking at the older formats and seeing what cards are recently printed and used in very powerful vintage and legacy decks, in combination with
dual commander.
Yeah, what cards are being used in dual commander that I've never heard of, that have never been on my radar, that nobody's talking about.
Ragavan Nimble Pilfer?
Oh, look at that! No surprise, he's in some dual commander decks. Tells you the power level.
He is in some dual commander decks here. Looking at Elise the Cinderwind deck. Also running a recently printed Spikefield Hazard, which deals 1 damage to any target. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die, exile it instead. Mm-hmm. It's a modal double-faced card from Return to Zendikar or Zendikar Rising.
So it's a land or a spell.
It's tap land or a spell.
So to see in real time, I see a card that I was drawn to based on dual commander. I don't know what the price has gone to, but I did spec on it and pick up a playset to not be caught with my pants down. Zergo Bell Striker at 50 cents is what I got it for. And he's right there. Is he gone up much? Not much. He's still at 50 cents. But it was one of those cards that I was like, it probably won't get much cheaper, and it's a very tricky card. And you can tell the power level of it in these aggressive dual commander decks. He's a 2/2 for 1, and he can't block creatures with power 2 or greater. But you can dash him. He's very unassuming. Recently printed. You know what I mean? But at the same time, probably won't get much cheaper. Jeez. So it was just one of those things that, like, I saw it. I didn't immediately recognize it from any other formats. And I was like, yeah, that's good. It's a 2/2 for 1. And it's rare for 50 cents. And it's powerful enough to be used in a dual commander deck. And I was like, just give me a playset. I'm not going to spec on it. I just want a playset to not get caught with my pants down. Who knows? Maybe someday it's a $5-10 card. Who knows? Right. I don't expect that ever. But it's like...
And you're out 50 cents now
exactly.
At the potential of... And that does sort of bring us back to one of the first things I think that we said today, which was you don't have to hit 100% of the time as long as you're hitting more often than you're not.
Yeah.
Like if that card just creeps up to now it's 60 cents, then it's 80 cents.
Right. And I never think twice about a card that I see that's a rare that's 50 cents. And that was why I spec'd so hard on Tainted Pact. Because Zergo Bell Striker was the type that I'm like, yeah, I don't know if it'll go up, but it's powerful enough for this deck, and blah, all of what I said. Tainted Pact blew my mind when I saw it. And I was like, it's 50 cents?
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Well, and you're right. They just had to print something else that woke people up to it.
Right. And they did that, but also, the thing that blew my mind was, why isn't this in every single commander deck that runs black? I was like, this is probably one of the best tutors I've ever seen, and it's 50 cents.
You know what else will blow your mind right now? Is probably the price of Khan's fetches, which have always been so cheap because it was the Zendikar fetches that were always so expensive. It was the enemy fetch lands that were so expensive. Well, if you don't have your Khan's fetches, you can hope that they get reprinted real soon.
Yeah.
Because
I remember these were all like in the teens for prices when they got reprinted in cons.
Another card we talked about. This is a flashback. We talked about this just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and sure enough, the state of modern has meant that Engineered Explosives has returned to its former glory.
Yep, you called it $5.
Yeah,
yeah, we were talking about this.
They were
card.
dirt cheap. Yeah, they were.
It's the price memory. This goes back again to exactly what we're talking about. Brad did a very good job with his price memory, knowing that this was an $80 card at one point. And he says, holy shit, like Affinity fell out of favor or something. Something happened where Engineered Explosives went down to $4 or $5. And he was like, well, I'm getting them. Like, this card is so powerful, and there you go. Like, that's exactly what you do. Like, if you put these pillars commit these pillars into your spec and memory, and I think that you won't ever be disappointed.
Right. Look at your bulk. If you have some sets that you've gone deep on, you can use the tools at MTG Stocks to sort and filter by the cards that have the highest value in any rarity. So you can look for those $+ plus uncommons that you might be able to buy list 50 or 100 uncommons for $50 or $100. Which you can then turn around and get yourself a, play set of EE right now, or two of your Khan's fetches.
Yeah, if you would have bulked like $20 worth of commons and uncommons or whatnot, and bought yourself 4 EEs a couple weeks ago, you'd be rolling in it right now. Yeah. Like that's the simple fact of the matter, and you'd be out literally $0.
Right, you're turning trash into treasure.
Exactly.
Just like that 1 mana red spell.
Yep. Hell yeah.
Thank you everybody for hanging out with us. We actually had a really active conversation tonight on YouTube, and we really appreciate you guys that stick around with us and that come to spend your Thursday evenings with us. If you like to listen to your podcast while you're driving to work, feel free to check us out on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to those sort of things. And if you haven't already, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon. And because, we don't come on every night at the same, every Thursday at the same hour. So you might want to get that notification. You might want to click the bell. We try. Actually, because of the weather tonight, my band's gig got canceled and we were a little lax in getting started. But Mike, thanks for coming over, man.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to say to these guys on the way out the door?
Hey, man, use these tools that we've taught you. Think for yourself, make your own specs, and we would love it if you came back on and tell us what you found out. Those are the conversations we love having, so we hope to see you again. Let us know what you find, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Peace.